Bradley, it's time to talk about Arc 25.
And man, we this is kind of like our arc that's about to transition us into arc 26 obviously. This is like transitioning us into like the end game of the story
And
almost.
what a transition it is because I got really hyped near the end of this arc. And there's already a lot of hype moments in it. God, man. I feel like from 25 onwards, at least as far as I've gone, or like even some of last arc, like I feel like Wild Bow is just on fire. He might be at his best. I thought arc 17 was hard to top, but like this stretch is just on another level. And I
Let's
think
talk
it's hitting on those levels that I said where it's like, oh, so much is connecting. But okay, we're gonna go kind of chronologically here on this one.
okay.
Taylor's in her tribunal. Um, I think notably there's a part where she says like maybe the system doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe we just need to move on and like live with things. I think she's talking to her dad. And her dad is just talking about how the system can be fixed and things can go back the way they were. She's like, maybe things are better being changed. I just think this is kind of reflective on the man back to it on the way that ever since arc 22 things just didn't really Taylor never really got the punishment for actions, and now it's like I never got punished for it. I'm at a good spot with my dad. I have confessed to him that I've murdered people, but he's still by my side. So things have kind of turned out okay for her, and she's okay keeping them like that. And it just goes to her mindset where it's like I'm kind of fucked up, and the system is kind of fucked up, but I mean I'm a part of it, and I can kind of make it work. It's hard to explain my feelings towards this line, but it just felt like uh, Taylor coming to terms with just kind of the person who she's become and not really wanting to go back. It just felt sad. I think that's the main takeaway here for me. Um, but right after that, Taylor's outside and they're playing the prank with her. Where who was it that had the big dick?
Uh, I don't even remember his name, but
He's not part of the main team, I don't think.
yeah, I don't think he was one of the wards. I think he might have been like a protectorate
Yeah,
member.
yeah, yeah.
But that whole scene, I was like, what the hell is happening?
It was really funny, and then you find out it's a prank. And Theo is so sweet, where he's like, "I didn't want to do it. I thought it was a dumb prank."
Oh, he's such a good boy.
Oh, what a good boy. Which this kind of starts blooming this friendship between Taylor and Theo, where they start training together, and he's the only one that kind of can take her out, because she always has to have someone watching her, just part of her, I guess, extended probationary period.
Yeah, because talking about the relationship as friends, platonically, by the way,
Oh yeah.
um, before we started talking about Art 25, I think when we weren't recording, I was saying I was looking at like the chapter summaries of this arc, and one of them says Taylor trains with Theo, and I'm like, that's just a cool fucking summary that exists.
What a good line to exist. I didn't talk about this, but when I found out Theo was Golem, if I'm being totally honest with myself, I was a little let down that his storyline brought him into being a member of the wards. And I can totally see the positives of that. And one of them is that he gets to build this relationship with Taylor, which I think is really important for future events. Um, that being said, I've as soon as Theo was introduced and Jack's challenge was introduced, I thought this would be like our chance to explore a different side of someone having powers instead of being a hero or a villain. Like it's I don't know what I wanted, but like maybe off the top of my head, if he was a rogue hero. I don't think we've really been with many rogue heroes, if any at all, right? Um, and maybe there could have been a thing where it's like he got his power from being alone, so maybe he thinks being alone is the best way to handle it, and he doesn't want to get other people caught up in Jack's struggle because the whole reason that the struggle's a problem is that 1,000 innocents will die. So maybe Theo doesn't want to get more people involved. There's a bunch of ways that they could have taken that. They being Wildbow, it's only him. But and his writing staff.
There
But
you go.
I'm not gonna lie and say that like it was a slight disappointment when I found out, but so much good comes from it where it's like I can totally understand why it happened. And Theo is still top 10 characters. Don't get it twisted. Never
Yeah, I
forget.
love this boy.
Oh yeah, he's great. Um, we get a bit of a time skip to when the Simurg is attacking now, and it's kind of weird, right? Because it's the first fight after Behemoth has been killed. So there's a lot of expectations coming in where it's like, oh, they can be killed. So what are we gonna do when the next one attacks? There's a lot of expectations put on the heroes, and Taylor's kind of just raring a fight. She wants to be proactive about this, and it's eating her up that she can't be, because she's too far away when the Simurg actually attacks. But the attack only lasts 40 minutes, and all she does is take down a plane.
And like the funny thing is, because it's the Simurg, whenever she attacks the plane, I'm just like, what if this is actually like the worst possible thing that could be happening?
Yeah, you can say that with Simurg every time, and at that point, it's like there's no point in debating it because I guess we'll
Yeah.
just have to wait and see because this could go anyway. We don't know, at least so far, what the limits of her precognition are, or if they can be interfered with, if she's really writing stuff into fate.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. But the real takeaway here is that she did a safe attack, just kind of to be safe and just kind of show up and get like she's getting paid for this, So she's like, I gotta get my quota in. So just
Yeah, she doesn't want the golden man showing up.
she's just in and out, which I thought was interesting and just kind of frustrates
She's
Taylor.
like, I don't know, when she's around the water cooler with Leviathan, she's like in and out, quick 40-minute attack. I'll be right, like it'll be good.
BRB, and then they go back and they start talking about Game of Thrones season 8
There you
or
go.
whatever's popping off at the time.
Yeah.
So we get to this point where Taylor's kind of comparing herself to Armsmaster. They're having one of their very lovely chats that they have from time to time. Um, this might be the point where she's like, no, that comes later. Never mind. But yeah, they're just talking. They're getting to know each other better now. They're spending more time together. And she says that she's becoming more like Arms Master, where she's offering people offers that she knows they won't take. That's kind of the person who she sees herself to have become. I don't agree that that's what Arm Master was doing when he was dealing with Taylor. Basically, this line makes it imply that Arm Master kind of used Taylor as a spy on the Undersiders, knowing that she saying it's an offer that she wouldn't accept. But I never felt like he did anything like that with her.
Like I think he was genuinely offering her.
Yeah, maybe I'm misremembering, and maybe there's something I missed. But the way that played out was, and it's been a while since I've read it, but it's kind of fresh on my mind since Tyler talked about it recently. It's like, okay, you stay in there, and as soon as, don't get me wrong, he wanted to take credit for it, but he's like, okay, and then I will help you pardon out all of the things you have to do while you're in there. Just don't do anything too reckless. And of course, Taylor did because she has to escalate. So I don't know. I think she's still, all this to say that she's still kind of negative on Armmaster, slash defiant. She still kind of views some of his past actions in a way that kind of colors how she sees him today. And I mean, it's getting better over time, but I feel like he left a lasting impression that's kind of being hard to rub off, I guess. Khonsu shows up.
Ooh.
This is so when Behemoth died and we got that feel good moment, in the back of my mind I'm like, okay, so what's the shoe that's gonna drop?
Yeah, like we can't have nice things. So what's gonna happen?
If Worm has taught me anything, is that you literally can't have nice things. I remember when Taylor was like, man, feels like everything's going great, and then the Slaughterhouse 9 showed up.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those scenarios. So in my mind, I was like, okay, either we're getting a replacement for Behemoth, or another Behemoth, or Leviathan and the Simurg are going to stop holding back. What we got was even worse, where we're going to get 2 more Endbringers. Khonsu shows up, and this shit is nuts. Like, Khonsu's initial attack got me in the same state of despair as watching Behemoth fight. even though he's way less destructive, he's almost impossible to fight. That's what makes him so scary.
Yeah. And like it's even more devastating because at least for these other Endbringers, they've been fighting them for years or decades, so they know what the power is going in. This guy, they can't know. So someone gets caught in like one of his circles and people just have to kind of witness this new horror. And I have to say, like I like the way he uses these like time acceleration circles where if he gets a wound, he'll like move the time
Hmm.
acceleration on it so it heals.
Yeah,
It's
really
cool.
cool. Um, but the most terrifying part of Kansu is that he can teleport.
Oh my god.
So they when we find out that he can teleport, the chapter kind of ends shortly after that. But then when you get to 25.5, you find out they've been fighting him for 3 days.
That is like one of the most shocking starts to a chapter. I'm just like, holy shit.
Yeah, my mouth was agape. Um, just think about that, man. That's 72 hours of nonstop Kansu teleporting, and the heroes having to mobilize to fight him for 30 minutes, and then he's teleporting to another city. And
Because
it's
like if
wow.
you're watching the news about like a Leviathan attack that's happening on the other side of the world, you're like, wow, this is terrible. At least he's not here. With
It,
Konsu, like you're sitting there in your living room and you're like, any minute he could just appear.
yeah, they say that no one's been able to sleep for more than 2 hour increments, really, because of the over looming fear that Kansu's just going to show up. I wonder if people worked that day.
Man, I feel like
I'm not going to work.
I'm not going to work. My boss is just gonna have to get over it.
Man, living in Worms sucks.
I'll say this is a scary world.
Um, we get the meeting of Cauldron and all of like some of the bigger ups. Even Chevalier was there, which was surprising to me. But I like how he lays down the law and he's like, "No, we're not going to release the prisoners." They start bartering with 100,000 lives, which just shows the scale that we're working with here.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, this is where I started thinking of Cauldron kind of as we talked about Fierce for arc 24, and I feel like Cauldron is like the even further utilitarian extreme than he is, where it's like, oh well, if we sacrifice 100,000 people, but save 200,000, then it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, who gets to choose the 100,000 people? And there's just so many moral arguments that come up with that, and there's not enough time in the world to like fully discuss that. So I don't know. I just wanted to like bring up, I think, Cauldron's role.
Yeah, and I have a feeling, I've had a feeling for a while that Cauldron is a quote unquote good force, just because like that's also the dramatic irony that we've come to expect from Worm. But they're good force in the utilitarian sense, where yeah. What's the deal with Morgna anyways? Like why does she want 100,000? I think I missed that. To
So
feed it to her whatevers.
yeah, she's like a stand user from
Yeah.
JoJo's, and she has some like shape shifting black mass with a skull, and I think we're meant to. She's supposed to be like, I mean, she's powerful enough to be here. Um,
She's powerful
and
enough to be a big contender for even having this conversation.
yeah, and I think we're meant to assume that her power's fueled by living
Lives.
people. So she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll fight it. Just give me this many thousand people."
She's also the one who's all about the fairies, right?
No,
No.
that would be um Glastic Winye.
God, that is it's the weirdest name, and because I've never seen it in text, I couldn't even begin to think how that's spelled.
It is not spelled how you think.
Great. Um, I don't. So did they accept 100,000? Because she goes on and fights, but I think I missed
I think
Chevalier's
I think
reaction.
Cauldron accepted the deal.
So so Chevalier just let that one slide, huh?
I mean,
Fuck.
he spoke out against it, but I'm not really sure what he can do.
Yeah, I think he realized that it's just like Well, I told them they shouldn't, but at the same time, if it gets Konsu out of our back, maybe I just need to voice my opinion and let whatever happens happens. And we get the next interlude where whose interlude was even who was the 25.a interlude?
There's only one interlude in 25.
Oh, I
But
marked it as an interlude, but it's just the last chapter.
yeah, 25.6.
Yeah.
I think like it is structured very differently.
No,
Uh,
but it's still Taylor. Yeah, that's why I was confused. I was like, this is all
yeah, it's
Taylor.
just a lot of jumping around, both in places and in time.
After 163 targets, Konsu has been defeated.
Jesus.
Insanity. With the help of Morgna, Legend, and Eidolon.
Oh, well, she helped defeat him, so I guess that means Cauldron was completely justified.
Fuck, what happened? Like, did those 100,000 lives get processed in this time skip that just happens now? I didn't even think of that, but oof.
Ooh.
Anyways, suddenly Taylor's 18, and we realize we've been living in a world now over a year and a half of just every 2 months an Endbringer attacks, and Taylor has been to so many of those fights now.
Yeah, and there's a lot about this time skip. There's this is one element of the story that if I'm not mistaken, Wildbow wants to pay special attention to on the rewrite.
Yeah, it was a bit weird. It felt, for how slow Worm can move sometimes,
Yeah.
this one felt super fast.
Yeah. There's been I think everybody has some kind of take on the time skip. I for one, I'm cool with time skips.
Yeah.
I think this is cool. I felt like it was a little I think it was a little jarring because uh we probably did a few mini time skips before I even realized we were time skipping. Um
Yeah.
but we end up getting some really cool lines out of it that I think kind of get us in the mindset we need to be after the time skip. The one that really stood out to me was I think it might have been Tecton who is like berating Taylor for running off to go to another one of these meetings with Cauldron. And he's like, you have been with us for way longer than you were ever with them, which
Yeah.
is referring to the Undersiders. Um, and hearing someone say that line, considering how long the story is and how much of the word count Taylor was with the Undersiders, we're just like, holy shit. But I really like it because it kind of shows that, like, for us, I think we still view Taylor more as her pre-time skip self, just because we've been with her pre-time skip self so long.
Mm-hmm.
And we do this really quick transition, and he says this line about he's like, why are you still so hung up on them? You've been with us for way longer. And I think it just shows that to Taylor, she never fully moved on. It's like those are her people. That's where her Cape career started. She has probably been in she's like she went up against the Slaughterhouse Nine with them. They were some of her first friends, and I don't know. I think I think that particular line was intentionally jarring.
My stance on it is pretty similar to yours, where it's like it was a jarring time skip that is very oddly paced with the rest of Worm, but at the
Yeah,
same time, it did such a good job to show that nothing emotionally relevant happened to Taylor in a year and a half. I think that's the main idea here, is that, like, if there was a big emotional moment for her in this time, we
we
would have
would have
probably
seen it.
seen it. But to her, it's been a routine of working with people. There were no real connections there. At least that's the take you get from this time
Yeah,
skip.
it's like
Because we didn't see it.
it's like she is here with these people because she has to be.
Because
That's part of the deal she made, and because she wants to help in the battle against the end of the world, I assume, with the
Yeah.
heroes. But
I mean, we find out later that functionally she's been preparing for the battle like at the end of the world more than most people have.
yeah,
And that's been her main focus. You always talk about how Taylor needs a goal, and here she has such a specific goal that like she closes herself off from. I feel like she never even tried to make friends with them with the Chicago Wards, and it's really disappointing. Not on a storytelling sense, just as like, damn Taylor, like
like
you,
Taylor, you work so hard to save people, but you you don't know these people that you're trying to save.
which is it's doubly sad when you learn more about Golem and all that.
Yeah.
Um, Taylor sucks. Woo woo. All right. For this interlude coming up, Bonesaw interlude, man.
Who
Wow.
saw this one coming?
Who saw? So when I found out about this interlude, I was like, I am not interested. I kind of can't stand Bonesaw. This is one of the best interludes in the series.
Hell
So
yeah.
this was super good. We get to see Bonesaw's trigger event, which is just terrifying. Basically, just the nine continuously undoing her work as she tries to patch together her family to where she eventually just has to break and let her mom die. And like, it's hard to say if she starts to admire Jack or she's forced to, and eventually her mind warps to where she does have some sort of infatuation with him. It's this weird borderline that I couldn't quite get a read on, and I'd love to see people's opinions on how Bonesaw really feels about Jack deep down inside.
There's so much I loved about getting to see where she came from, because this little psychopath who just experiments on these people like they're things, you like whenever we first see her, you wonder what makes someone like that. And we see that whenever she's going through her trigger event and her family's being repeatedly killed by the nine, she is desperately trying to save them, but having the insight she does from her power and doing this for so long, she eventually reaches that point where she says she views her mother just as a thing. She just kind of loses her ability to see people as people. They're just these machines to her now. Um, and I think there's something else that we learn about later in this interlude that I think is also going to be relevant here. And actually, I guess I might as well talk about it now. Um, if we want to go a little non chronologically here.
Yeah.
Um, Later in this interlude, she has a talk with Contessa, who tells her a few statements, which, if Contessa's telling you anything, it's probably because she has an objective in mind telling you that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing she does tell Riley, though, is she brings up the concept of breadth and depth. Um,
Yeah.
and this is the first time we hear about these things in this story. Um, and I think if there's ever a time to introduce this concept, it's probably most relevant in Bonesaw's interlude, because Bonesaw starts to reflect on the concepts of breadth and depth and what they mean for these clones she's making. And the theory she settles on is that the connections we have with our passengers, I say our, like we're fucking parahumans,
Oh,
the
you're not?
connections that humans have with their passengers kind of fall into two categories, and she calls one of them deep connections. And she says that these are whenever someone is very naturally, their personality is like naturally aligned with their passenger.
Such
And
as
she,
what's been hinted with Jack in
yeah,
the Numberman interlude.
yeah, Numberman hinted it, and even here in this interlude, I think Bonesaw like explicitly uses him as the example of what she sees as depth. For breadth, she is looking at her clones, and she sees that she gives them their powers basically as soon as they're born, and they are growing up in their tubes with this connection to their passenger. But every time she tries to test one, she sees that they're too violent, And it's like because they got their power so young, their personality has been morphed by the passenger. Instead of being naturally aligned with it, it's like the passenger has influenced them to be naturally to be aligned with it. And she thinks about this in
Hmm.
terms of her clones, but I think we introduced this concept in Bonesaw's interlude because she's probably the youngest person with a trigger event we saw in the story. And you have to wonder how much she was influenced by her passenger.
That's so interesting for multiple reasons that we might talk about in a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's table this conversation. I want to have this conversation later. That's
I'm sure it'll
super
be
cool.
relevant later.
I'm sure. Um, oh, Tyler's calling me. Hold on.
Oh God.
I do want to talk about the her friend that she makes, whose name escapes me.
He's guy. He's guy. I don't know.
What? He's Guy. Okay, that's a
He's.
sentence.
I'm sure he has a name.
So Guy is just a little kid that works at a store, and Bonesaw befriends him, which is such a significant moment because she's alone, right? Jack is already in stasis. She's just hustling to get all these clones ready, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I gotta go to the store to pick up some whatever you need to make clones." And she starts befriending this boy. She even kidnaps a girl for her memories and like she hides it from the boy, and it's just all sorts of fucked up because it's a Bonesaw interlude. You know it's gonna get like that.
You just know.
You just know. But I think notably, this is when we most get to see her rebelling from the brainwashing that Jack and her passenger potentially have done to her. Where it's kind of an insignificant thing, but she gives him a letter to for with plane tickets for him to escape once they're back. And I just think it's how did you humanize such an annoying piece of shit character like that, Wild Bo? It was
Yeah, like
a great moment.
she would have never done this before. She would have done quite the opposite before.
She would have put like a poisonous paper that will make him a miasma at the most
Yeah.
critical juncture of his life.
I love
Uh,
to see how she changes over the course of one chapter because we find out in this chapter that for like the way she acts around Jack, it is, or maybe at least it was at first, pretty much an act. He has this image he wants her to maintain, and she does, and maybe doing it for so many years, she deluded herself into that becoming her true personality. And now, for the first time since she was really, really little, Jack isn't around, and she doesn't have to pretend anything. She can act however she wants. And we see how much more human she becomes. Obviously, she is still a monster,
because I
but
mean, she's been warped this way, like
yeah,
it's not a flip of a switch.
yeah. And I don't know. I just love. I love the bone saw that we see in the later half of the chapter.
It's it's notable to say that she still helps him out, even though like she seems so unsure about it, and there seems to be so much deep centered hatred towards Jack, but also this weird infatuation with him. It's a really fucked up, complex relationship, and it's one that I'd have to reread the chapter and like really pick away at it the whole chapter because I feel like there's a lot there.
Yeah, it feels like the most extreme case of Stockholm syndrome of
Exactly.
all time.
And so, like, even without Jack there, and she's in full control, she gets a little bit of herself back, but she still follows through with the plan.
Yeah.
Very sad when you really think about it. Um, yeah, that was a fantastic interlude.
And then at the very end, just because it's cool and you brought it up to me when you were reading it, Grey Boy's introduction is so
Whew.
ridiculously menacing. Like all these clones are naked coming out of their tubes, and she notes that he was naked in his tube, but when he steps out, he's wearing like a private school uniform. There's like double images of him
Oh
everywhere.
my god, that makes so much sense now.
And she tops all this off with as far as powers went, his was like as unfair as they got. And I'm just like, how could he possibly be worse than half the people in this room?
And yet somehow he is.
Yet some
And it's really cool how when she's like, I think shaking hands or hugging, but she's trying to keep a poker face. She's like, oh, he could obliterate me and everyone in this room right now.
yeah, she said he's the kind of person who would use his power on someone in this room just because he could. And of course, we don't know what his power is at this point.
And right as she says that, that's when he approaches her too. So
Yeah,
tension
it's just
building.
like we don't know what his power is in this interlude yet. But later, when we find out, her saying that he's the type of person who just uses it willy nilly horrifies me.
Man, Gray Boy, huh? It's also notable to say that he's the only one that has one clone because even Jack is not fucking with that.
Yeah,
Not that much.
there's roughly 300 clones
Oh my
of
god.
psychopaths in this room, and Jack is confident that he can wrangle them all. But I'm only gonna make one great boy because
Jack's lack of confidence here is very interesting too. Now
oh yeah,
that wow, man, Worm, be good. That's
literally.
all I got for 25.
Yeah, and like I think a lot of our time was spent on that Bonesaw interlude, but
It was worth
like
it.
obviously, right? Because it's so good.
All right, gang. That's
Ooh.
and by gang I mean me and Bradley. That's 25.